Picture this for a second. Imagine a kid who's literally never played out on the street with the neighborhood kids. Why? Well, because instead of playing, that child is inside, rehearsing, with the very real threat of a belt hovering nearby. Welcome to today's Explainer. We are unpacking the story of a man who sold over 400 million albums, completely rewrote the rules of the entire music industry, and became the most recognizable face on the planet. Yet his greatest, honestly most unattainable dream was simply to have a normal childhood. We're talking, of course, about Michael Jackson. He was the king of pop for sure. But when we look closely at the data, the history, and the psychology of it all, we see a portrait of someone who was, above all, fragile, brilliant, and deeply lonely. We're not just doing a standard list of facts or rehashing tabloids today. We are exploring the man behind the global icon, the traumas that shaped him, and the ultimate price of being the absolute greatest.
I never had a childhood. This isn't just some throwaway quote. It's a heartbreaking admission he made years later, often with tears in his eyes. And really, this establishes the absolute central theme of our explainer today. Behind all the glittering costumes and the massive stadium tours was a genius who experienced a profound, crushing isolation. Someone who fundamentally just wanted a normal life, a life that was completely denied to him right from the start.
Section 1. The Broken Childhood, a Stolen Youth.
So this whole story kicks off back on August 29, 1958, in Gary, Indiana. Try to imagine this. 11 people crammed into a tiny house. His father, Joe Jackson, worked in a steel mill, and they were living in real poverty. Music was their ticket out. But man, that salvation came at a staggering cost. By the age of 5, Michael wasn't just a kid who liked to sing in the living room, he was working as a full-time artist. While other children his age were running around a park playing tag, Michael was chasing stages in nightclubs. The sheer speed at which he was forced to grow up is honestly difficult to even comprehend.
Here's the really crucial part about how he was treated during this time. Michael wasn't merely a child prodigy to his father, Joe. He was a project. And with this project, there was absolutely zero room for error. If Michael missed a step in a routine, or if he sang a false note, the belt was brought out. It was this intense regime of fear and absolute perfectionism instilled in him before he even knew how to read.
And honestly, understanding that trauma puts his famous home, Neverland, into a completely different perspective. The media loved to portray the Neverland Ranch, with its roller coasters and private zoo, as just wild billionaire eccentricity. But based on the psychological profile of his early years, it was much deeper than that. It was a direct response to his stolen youth, an obsessive, desperate attempt to literally buy back the time and the innocence that was forcefully taken from him when he had to become an adult at 5 years old.
Section 2. The Road to the Top, a Global Phenomenon.
400 million. Let that sink in. That is the estimated number of albums he sold worldwide. After the Jackson 5 took the world by storm, Michael managed a transition that very, very few child stars ever survive. He became an absolute, gravity-defying global phenomenon all on his own. His solo career really kicked into high gear with Off the Wall, which was a massive statement of intent. But what came next shattered literally every ceiling in the music industry. 70 million. In 1982, the release of Thriller changed everything. Moving 70 million copies, it became an absolute juggernaut that entirely redefined what a pop album could achieve on a global scale. And the critical acclaim completely matched that commercial success. 8. That's how many Grammy Awards he secured in a single night for Thriller. He was completely rewriting the rules of the music industry right in front of the world's eyes. But behind this insane success lies another astonishing number, 39. That is the number of Guinness World Records he held. When we analyze the data behind his massive rise, we see a man who is combining incredible natural talent with truly groundbreaking innovation. He achieved these records through a notorious, almost superhuman obsession with the details. I mean, he would rehearse his steps to the point of sheer exhaustion, literally until his feet bled. He innovated to the point of actually patenting the anti-gravity lean used in Smooth Criminal. And of course, with the moonwalk, he seemingly rewrote the laws of physics right there on stage. But bringing this back to our core theme, all of this relentless innovation and perfectionism, it highly suggests that behind this iconic, unstoppable facade, he was a man desperately trying to outrun himself and his own inner demons.
Section 3. Loneliness at the Top, Fame and Isolation.
Okay, so just 2 years after Thriller changed the world, a pivotal turning point happened. In 1984, while he was filming a commercial for Pepsi, a pyrotechnics malfunction caused severe, tragic physical trauma. He suffered horrible burns to his scalp, and this really marked the beginning of a dramatic cascade of physical and personal transformations that would essentially follow him for the rest of his life.
It created this devastating contrast between how the world saw him and how he actually felt. The public essentially viewed him as almost godlike, but simultaneously as an eccentric, or to a lot of those around him, simply a walking wallet. But the reality? He was sick. He suffered from vitiligo, a disease that progressively stripped his skin of its pigment, making him a massive target for relentless media speculation. So instead of seeing a man suffering from a real illness and severe isolation, people just saw a strange artist physically altering himself.
For him, fame became a literal prison. He retreated entirely into the sanctuary of Neverland just to escape. Everywhere else, he was completely surrounded by bodyguards, hunted by tabloids, and encircled by people who only saw his financial value. He was arguably the most famous person in history, and yet, simultaneously, one of the most profoundly lonely.
Section 4. Scandals and Fall, a Turbulent Era.
The 90s and 2000s were defined by devastating accusations in seemingly endless courtrooms. The coverage was unrelenting, often described by sources as a total media witch hunt, as society just watched the spectacular fall of its biggest icon. While he was ultimately acquitted of all charges in 2005, the damage was completely permanent. His reputation was irrevocably torn apart. The intense trauma of these trials fueled deep paranoia, and alongside massive financial mismanagement, pushed him to the absolute brink.
Section 5. The man behind the icon, the final act.
After those 2005 acquittals, he really spent years in the shadows. The This Is It tour, which was announced in 2009, was supposed to be his great comeback, a really desperate final attempt to regain control of his narrative and his finances. But his body and his spirit were simply too exhausted. Before the tour could even begin, on June 25, 2009, the world collectively stopped. He died from acute propofol intoxication, bringing one of the most complex, brilliant, and tragic legacies in pop culture to a sudden, shocking halt.
And this brings us to a really profound, tragic lesson. Fame does not heal trauma. Perfectionism does not fill the void. Genius is absolutely no guarantee of happiness. In fact, it often demands an incredibly cruel, exacting price. In his lifelong attempt to escape the darkness and the abuse of his childhood, he ultimately got lost in the blinding light of his own stardom.
I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on today. When we look back at this history, perhaps it's time we stop merely looking for the king of pop and try to actually see the complex, beautiful, and tragic human being underneath it all. A man who was broken early on, who simply wanted the innocence of youth, and who just wanted to be loved. The world got its king, but at what cost to the man beneath the crown? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.